Hello and welcome to the 2020 McCabe Lecture at Swarthmore College. I'm Marty Rollant, Associate Director of Alumni and Parent Engagement at the college, and it's my privilege to begin tonight's program. First, a few notes about our virtual format. We plan to leave time at the end of tonight's program for question and answers. If you have questions for our speaker, please use the chat function on Zoom to submit them. Our moderator will take as many questions as we have time for. We are also recording tonight's program. I'm pleased to now share with you the pre-recorded opening comments from President Valerie Smith about the McCabe Lecture and its namesake, Thomas B. McCabe, as well as tonight's speaker, Brian Wong, class of 1996. Swarthmore College President Valerie Smith is a distinguished scholar of African American literature and culture. For many years, Val was a professor of English and African American studies at UCLA and at Princeton, where she also served as dean of the college for 4 years before coming to Swarthmore in 2015. During Val's time at Swarthmore, she has made the college a more diverse and inclusive place, strengthened local partnerships, and advocated for the value of the liberal arts, and more specifically the arts and humanities, both nationally and internationally. Thank you for joining us, and please enjoy this message from President Smith, as well as our lecture from Brian Wong tonight.
Good evening. I'm Valerie Smith, President of Swarthmore College, and I'm delighted to welcome you to the annual McCabe Lecture in its first virtual format. Thank you very much for joining us. Tonight we are honored to hear from Brian Wong, class of 1996, who will deliver his talk entitled The Great Reset and the Role of Entrepreneurship, Technology, and a Liberal Arts Education. I have no doubt that his lecture will be both engaging and timely. Before I introduce Brian, however, I'd like to take a few moments to tell you about Thomas B. McCabe, the person for whom this lecture is named. Thomas B. McCabe, a graduate of Swarthmore's class of 1915, was chairman and CEO of Scott Paper Company, chairman of the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System, and a public governor of the New York Stock Exchange. Mr. McCabe believed deeply in the value of education and was widely honored for his contributions to the field. During his lifetime, he received honorary doctoral degrees from 15 colleges and universities, including Swarthmore. Here at Swarthmore, McCabe's name, vision, foresight, and generosity endure. Generations of students have studied in the Thomas B. and Jeanette L. McCabe Library and started and ended their Swarthmore experiences in the Scott Amphitheater, a gift from Mr. McCabe. The inaugural McCabe Lecture, established in Thomas McCabe's honor, was held in 1986. Since then, the lecture has reflected his commitment to education and his belief in young people's potential to make their mark on the world. To that end, he also established the McCabe Achievement Awards Scholarship Fund in 1952, which has awarded scholarships to more than 300 Swarthmore students. Now, traditionally, the co-presidents of the McCabe Scholars introduce the McCabe Lecturer. We have broken with tradition this year for logistical reasons, but I'd like to recognize this year's co-presidents, Destiny Samuel, Gabriella Vetter, and Mary Camuso. Destiny Samuel is from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and is a Black Studies major. She's the treasurer of the McCabe Leadership Team, a board member of Swarthmore Afro-American Student Society, a writing associate fellow in the Writing Center, and a research and information associate in the Swarthmore Libraries. Gabriella Vetter is a junior from Coatesville, Pennsylvania, double majoring in peace and conflict studies and sociology and anthropology. In addition to being a co-president of the McCabe Scholars Cohort, she is student government vice president and a member of the Archery Club. And finally, Mary Camuso is a prospective sociology major from Red Hill, Pennsylvania. On campus, she serves her peers as the executive co-chair of the Diversity and Inclusion Committee within the Student Government Organization, as well as the McCabe Scholars co-president. Thank you all for your leadership and your contributions to our community. And now I'm pleased to introduce the 2020 McCabe Lecturer, Brian Wong. Brian Wong is the founder and chairman of RADII Media and former vice president of Alibaba Group. An entrepreneur, innovator, and investor whose career has spanned e-commerce, education, media, and government, Brian was the first American and the 52nd employee to join Alibaba Group in 1999. At Alibaba, Brian founded Alibaba Global Initiatives, where he designed capacity building programs for emerging markets such as Rwanda, Ethiopia, and Indonesia, and collaborated with local grassroots entrepreneurs, national governments, and multilateral organizations with the objective of sharing the benefits of the digital economy and ways it could be used to create a more inclusive society for all. During Brian's tenure with the Alibaba Group, he also served as the executive director of the Alibaba Global Leadership Academy, special assistant to the chairman for international affairs, and vice president of global supplier development, during which he spearheaded Alibaba.com's international expansion by setting up new operations and partnerships in the US, India, Southeast Asia, Europe, the Middle East, and Latin America. Today, Brian is founder and chairman of RADII, a digital media company whose mission is to amplify the voices of youth in China to reflect the changes taking place in culture, technology, and life in one of the most dynamic markets in the world. He is also managing director of Seacliff Partners, an angel investment firm dedicated to empowering entrepreneurs to build companies that help solve society's problems through the creation of digital ecosystems. Brian has been an advisor to various governments on e-commerce strategies and has been featured as a speaker at conferences such as the World Economic Forum annual meeting in Davos, the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development E-commerce Week, and the B20 Business Summit. Brian was selected as a young global leader by the World Economic Forum in 2015. He is a China Aspen Fellow and a member of the Aspen Global Leadership Network. He is also a member of the Committee of 100. Brian earned his bachelor's degree in English literature from Swarthmore College, a master's certificate from the Johns Hopkins University Nanjing University Center for U.S. and China Studies, and an MBA from the University of Pennsylvania's Wharton School. He is a member of the Council on Presidential Initiatives here at Swarthmore. Brian, thank you so much for joining us this evening, or should I say this morning, since you're in Asia and 12 hours ahead of us. Thank you.
Well, thank you, President Smith, for that very kind introduction, and thank you, Marty, for and Mara and Swarthmore College for having me as a speaker for today's McCabe lecture. I'm very honored to be part of this series and very grateful for this opportunity. As President Smith shared in terms of Mr. McCabe's background and legacy, this is a true Renaissance man who really was a business titan, but also a selfless public servant. And this truly sets a high bar for all of us as we embark on, our lives, both as Swarthmore graduates, but also, contributors to our society. And so while I was not so fortunate to be a McCabe scholar during my time at Swarthmore, perhaps the one thing that might qualify me to speak tonight are the endless hours that I spent on Friday nights in McCabe Library, cramming for my pre-medical studies curriculum. So if there's one thing that might give me the credentials to speak tonight, hopefully it's that. But with that, I'd like to just start off this talk, and I know that we have limited time. I'm going to be sharing with you a presentation, one that I think sort of encapsulates what I believe is the essence of what I want to share with you all today. If you just bear with me. So this is the presentation that I've titled The Great Reset, the role of entrepreneurship, technology, and liberal arts education. This is a very timely sort of topic, especially given what we are facing today in the world. The world, as we know it, is facing a great pandemic and unprecedented challenges all around the world. COVID, social unrest are all things that we're trying to deal with. But at the same time, what I truly believe that this represents an unprecedented opportunity, an opportunity for us to embark on a great reset. An opportunity, this great reset, is to really create in the likeness of what we hope can be a more sustainable and just and equitable world. And so what I'd like to do is really frame this conversation such that we can start to imagine what this new world will look like, given what we have to work with today and what we can envision for the future. Now, to do this, I'm going to actually take you on a journey. I'm going to take you on a personal journey of mine that starts with Swarthmore College. And if you bear with me, we're going to go through this together and then look at the different components of entrepreneurship, technology, and liberal arts. So we're going to start off as we embark here at Swarthmore. There we are with all of our friends, and these are where we make some of our greatest friendships during these 4 years in college. And for me, Swarthmore was a time of great anxiety and uncertainty, but it was also a time of discovery. It was a time for me and all of us at the school to really explore our true passions, our hopes, and to do this in an unhindered way. We made friends, and the experiences that we all shared really shaped us for who we are, but also create a foundation for what we are to become. And so this was really the start. Swarthmore College, I was a pre-med English literature going, but thinking that maybe that was a good choice of study because one, my father said, who was also a physician, that being a doctor would be a very helpful sort of way to contribute back to society. But also I had a passion in terms of understanding and studying and even writing literature, and that was something that I thought could be a hobby. But for me, what I really discovered at Swarthmore was my passion or desire to bring the greatest good for the greatest number of people in society. And so for me, that was my guiding light. It was what I believed could be the most effective way to be a citizen in the world. And so that was also my justification for pursuing this area of study. So to China for a short grad school valley. I'm from Palo Alto, California. That's where I grew up. So it was close to home. But also this return to the Bay Area allowed me to really understand what was happening sort of in the technology space. At the same time, despite the fact that I was in Silicon Valley, I actually took a job in city politics working for the mayor of San Francisco at the time. And ironically, it was because of my relationships through Swarthmore classmates that I actually found this opportunity. But I really believe that this was an opportunity to provide an opportunity for me to really understand the public sector and what one could do in that capacity in public service to help the larger society. And so that was my time in Silicon Valley. The medical school plans had clearly been derailed, but I thought that maybe I could continue to explore my path in other capacities. But ironically, during my time in San Francisco, I met a man named Jack Ma. Jack Ma in 1999 was that he called Alibaba, with a peculiar mix of the internet, China, and the opportunity to impact society. The opportunity got me very excited because I said, what a great combination. Perhaps this is the way that I could fulfill this mission of doing the greatest good for the greatest number of people through technology, using China as the starting point for understanding how that technology could impact the rest of the world, and then take it from there. And so that brought me to a place called Hangzhou of Shanghai, where Alibaba was founded. So that's really how my early life began, and that's what took me on this journey ahead. And this is where I ended up, Hangzhou, China. In the early days of 1999, most people would go to this city not because of the internet or Alibaba, but because of this location, the Westlake, one of the most beautiful locations in China, famous since the Song Dynasty, when Marco Polo wrote about this town or city as heaven on earth. And so Hangzhou is probably the least, the last place you would expect to find an internet company, but at the same time, this is where Alibaba was started. And at that time in China, despite the fact that in America there were over 100 million internet users, China only had 10 million internet users at the time. There was no retail e-commerce, there was no payments, online payments, there was no private logistics businesses. And most people would ask, why on earth would you go to a place called Hangzhou to start your career in the internet when everything is happening in Silicon Valley? And so that was a question I started to ask myself as well once I arrived, realizing just how rudimentary things were in China in those days. But fast forward to China in 2020, from 10 million internet users to now 904 million internet users in China. Over 700 million of them shop through mobile devices. And the total gross merchandise value in China today is over $1.5 trillion. This is gross merchandise value generated in e-commerce sales. Now that represents close to 54% of the world's e-commerce transactions. So within 20 years, China has transformed from merely 10 million internet users to 900 million internet users, and gone from virtually 0% of the world's e-commerce transactions to nearly 54%. Moreover, in that time, the gross, the per capita income of the Chinese citizen has gone from $800 in 1999 to over 10,000 US dollars. So the changes that have happened in China in the last 21 years have been astronomical and almost mind-boggling to think that this much change could happen in such a short time. And when we talk about China's digital sort of revolution, there are many things in today's world. If you come to China, you will see that are quite amazing. And particularly this phenomenon of new retail is a concept that really China has led the way by taking the online and the offline sort of worlds and integrating them so that when you have a shopping experience in a grocery store, for example, and this photo we see here called Fresh Hippo, it's a concept that was developed by Alibaba a few years ago. Your experience is not just going into a store and buying something and taking it home with you. It involves an entire experience where you walk in and the store knows who you are. It understands what sort of products you're looking for, so it can push it to you. You can look at products, you can scan their QR codes and really understand the heritage or the origins of that product, especially with regard to fresh produce, where it came from, how long ago it was shipped, when it was actually picked, if it's produce, and any other details associated with that product. You can then decide to purchase it and take it home with you. You can scan the code and purchase it there and leave the store to do other things. In half an hour, the product will arrive at your doorstep, or you can have the food cooked in the store and eat it there on the spot. And so this concept of new retail actually provides many more options to consumers in terms of convenience, but it also provides to the merchants themselves a large amount of understanding of their customers so they can provide them what they need when they need it. The other concept of new retail is really around delivery and how now in today's China, there are a significant number of businesses that are able to deliver products directly to the consumer at home. Now, this became a huge benefit to those consumers who were stuck at home during the COVID lockdown. And today, over 44% of the internet users in China use these delivery services and generating close to $100 billion in turnover because of these delivery services. So that's new retail in terms of a concept, but it's revolutionized the way people live their lives and brought great convenience to them, but also to the merchants themselves. In terms of a cashless society, you've probably heard as well what's happening in China, where people no longer carry wallets with them, but all they need is a mobile phone, because most of your financial activities are done through a mobile device. 768 million mobile payment users, over 85% of China's total population uses mobile payments. And these transactions total close to 30 trillion US dollars on an annual basis. That's over 100 times that in the United States in terms of transaction volume. But more importantly, what the cashless society has brought is a increase in financial inclusion and participation of segments of China's population that previously did not have access to any of these financial services. Specifically, things like credit ratings, individual credit ratings for both people, but also small businesses. There are probably 560 million people that have individual credit ratings thanks to the digital payment system, which means that they can access credit in a much more convenient way. In fact, this credit system didn't exist prior to the creation of Alipay, which is a business that Alibaba created. And as a result, now, because of this mobile payment system, they can have their own credit scores. 280 million SME loans were also given out since the launch of this platform. And things like wealth management services, imagine fixed income products, money market funds, even insurance. 770 million people now can buy insurance or do buy insurance because of the cashless society. There are a number of other services that now are really taking off in China's everyday society, things like live streaming and mobility. You can travel long haul all the way to last mile, all using your mobile phone to access services, flights, cars, public transportation. You don't need tickets, you just have a QR code on your phone, but also bicycles that will get you from a subway stop to your home. But probably the most significant impact I see in terms of the digital economy in China is how it's affected rural areas. This is an initiative that Alibaba, along with many other e-commerce companies, really have focused on in the last 5 years. And the phenomenon of Taobao villages, Taobao is the consumer e-commerce business that Alibaba created, has created jobs, close to 7 million jobs in the rural areas, generating 100 billion US dollars in gross merchandise value for rural areas. This is unprecedented, and it's become a model for new development models studied by the UNDP and the World Bank, really because what it's done is empowered local farmers to take more control over their own sort of business dealings by reducing the number of middlemen in the supply chain when selling fresh produce directly to cities, and allowing them to capture a higher percentage of the profits when they sell their fresh produce. Moreover, it allows for much faster sort of processing and transportation of their produce, so that there's a reduction in wastage and spoilage of the products. So that's China and its digital economy today. It's a snapshot. I know it's quite a bit to stuff into a short amount of time, but I now want to sort of show how, you know, sort of entrepreneurship played a role in all this, and specifically with regard to the Alibaba story. In 1999, you know, we all sort of started this company in Jack's apartment. Jack had 18 founders. I joined shortly after that. And what I think really distinguished him in terms of what he was trying to do was the strong sense of mission, that what he wanted to do was really create something for small businesses, to help the little guys, to get them online and help them have a voice at a time when big business and government were really dominating what was international trade. There was a real sense of positivity and optimism. We had a slogan, if not now, when, if not me, then who? That was the call to action for anyone that wanted to join this company. This is our first advertisement for job seekers for Alibaba in 1999. And really this sort of attitude, this belief that we were doing something important was one that was pervasive throughout the organization. And the other thing that Jack really had was this, the Alibaba spirit was from the wuxia kung fu novel culture. He was a big fan of kung fu, and what he believed in these stories that were often you know, told was how important it was to have someone that was looking out for the little guys, those who were marginalized, those who were being kind of downtrodden because of, you know, the you know, whether it was a evil dictator or, you know, injustices in society. What Jack believed is our mission was not unlike these heroes in the Kung Fu novels. We were here to use technology to help the little guys have a chance and be part of the mainstream sort of economy. And so this was our mission, to make it easy to do business anywhere. And we had to be an essential website for businesses and to enabling a platform that would allow people to meet at Alibaba, work at Alibaba, and to live at Alibaba. That was 1999. And today, our mission remains, Alibaba's mission remains the same: to make it easy to do business anywhere, to continue to last 102 years, which is really a long-term goal of ours, so that we can span 3 centuries as the first internet company to do so. But then we set some very lofty goals by 2036 to serve 2 billion consumers, to provide 100 million jobs, and to enable 10 million SMEs to be profitable. And these are very deliberate goals, because by saying 2 million consumers, what we hope is that we can be global in nature and scope. It's because China only has 1.4 billion consumers. We need to go beyond China and help other consumers access products and services. But job creation should be really at the focus of what we do, not just making profits, but creating opportunities for other people, and also particularly to help SMEs become successful. And so this is what Alibaba is today. It is an ecosystem. It is more than a company. All of the logos you see here are businesses that we've created within the ecosystem. But the thing that really drives this ecosystem is data. The new oil, we say, in the digital economy is data. And data is what ties all of these platforms together, whether it's commerce, logistics, payment, cloud computing. Data is the lifeblood of this ecosystem. And what it enables is for people to be able to access the services and the products they need. To allow companies to better understand the customer need, create the more insights and value you can create. And so the paradigm by which we approach Alibaba is a new business paradigm. It's not a paradigm of a zero-sum game. It's not a paradigm of you win, I lose. But rather, it's really a paradigm that we should be through the use and sharing of data from these ecosystems, so that businesses can benefit in terms of their ability to grow and provide the services needed to serve the needs of the consumers. And so that's really kind of a short story of how one entrepreneur, Jack Ma, was able to create an ecosystem that addresses many of the problems that we have in society and do it in a way that is sustainable. The next part that I want to talk about is really then what is the role, specifically how it can be utilized or how it has been utilized to kind of push forward this reset. So this diagram is a very complex diagram. I don't expect you all to kind of take it all in fully. But what I really want to point out is that Alibaba as a company and what it created really helped to build a foundational layer of what we see is the digital economy today. E-commerce, payments, smart logistics, and cloud computing form the 4 pillars of the digital economy in China today. Now, Alibaba was not a company that was able to do this all by itself. You know, with many things in life, it comes as a result of good fortune, luck, and a lot of preparation. But you can see the external layer, things like the population size of a market, social stability, what kind of physical infrastructure was there prior, what sort of internet infrastructure exists, and then what are the different policies that the government have, as well as you know, the capabilities in terms of manufacturing, the financial markets. All of these played a role in providing an environment to create this digital sort of infrastructure or pillars. At the same time, there are other factors like external market trends, both domestic but also global. Alibaba was launched at a time when China was about to enter the WTO in 2001. The WTO provided a major boost to businesses to do export. And one of the things that the biggest needs that was not being met was the small businesses and their ability to do export. And the internet played a critical role in helping them reach those international markets. So all of these factors played a role in the formation and support of the creation of these 4 pillars of the digital economy. But once the 4 pillars were created, you can see all the application layers that could be built on top of that, things like AI, IoT, new retail. These are the things, the applications then could be built on top of these 4 pillars in China. Now, with the advent of COVID, I think we all know the challenges that we faced and are facing. And this was one of the amazing things to see that many of the businesses that Alibaba had created could be put immediately to use to address the needs and challenges that were the result of the COVID pandemic. Now, I would argue that the Great Reset has been happening over the last 5-10 years, but in a much slower pace. What happened with COVID was the acceleration of the digitization of many aspects of our society. And here things were done in terms of controlling the spread in China, the community support that was required, and even the SME support that was required, because SMEs make up the lifeblood of many of the societies in the world. They provide the majority of the sustenance for many of the people. So all these things all right, so technical difficulties. So we were talking about how to make globalization more inclusive. And so really the idea is that anyone with a mobile phone should be able to access this mainstream economy that was evolving thanks to international trade. And so really this is what we've pursued since that time. Since we were able to start to create the notions of this ecosystem, we've really focused, or Alibaba has really focused on really using e-commerce to promote SME development, to promote rural development, and to really create more jobs, particularly for youth, women, disabled, and those in the rural areas. And the benefits of e-commerce mean that many of those who were not able to access the mainstream sort of economy should be able to do so because the the pervasiveness of technology is becoming much greater, particularly in emerging markets. The cost of mobile phones has been reduced significantly, and increasingly connectivity is something which more and more people are able to access in these markets. And specifically, one vision that Jack had for the world is something called the EWTP platform, a platform that is connected through hubs and spokes of digital connectivity of different countries that enable small businesses particularly to engage in international trade. You simplify the logistics processes, you simplify the payments processes, and thereby allowing more SMEs, whether they're in cities or in rural areas, to be able to trade across border through this platform. And today, Alibaba has over 5 different hubs from China to Malaysia to Ethiopia to Brussels. And increasingly, these hubs are being used to empower small businesses around the world. Jack has also been an advisor to the United Nations Secretary General on the importance of digital cooperation. So this is clearly an agenda item that is of top priority for many kind of within the multilateral organizations. But also, one of the things that I focused on in my last few years at Alibaba was building an empowerment model, an education program to really share the benefits of the digital economy in the emerging markets, both the governments, entrepreneurs, but also to help develop curriculum for the digital economy amongst schools throughout the world. And this is an example of some of the programs that we continue to run in Africa, ASEAN, South Asia, and really it's to share lessons from China and the Alibaba experience, but also encourage the digital entrepreneurs in their own regions to build platforms that will enable this access that we've experienced in China to the digital economy and to address the issues that they face in their own markets using technology and employing their entrepreneurial skills. These are just some of the individuals that I think are worth highlighting. Demilare is a Nigerian entrepreneur who has created successful e-commerce companies as a serial entrepreneur. But now what he's done is focused his time on working with the Nigerian government to help empower traditional businesses to digitize their companies. And this is a focus on companies such as in the oil and gas industry, very traditional industries that have been a big part of Nigeria's economy, yet at the same time are falling behind because of the lack of digital understanding. Clarisse is the CEO and founder of a company called Hey Hey. She's from Rwanda. And what she has done is really created opportunities through logistics and other technology platforms to link farmers in the rural areas of Rwanda to cities, but not only just cities, but also international markets, to enable them to actually do international trade in a way that was not possible before, but thanks to technology now, they can export their products cross-border. And she's worked with many other entrepreneurs from this eFounders program to do that. Now, Wai Hong and Wilson are both from Malaysia, and during the COVID pandemic, one of the amazing things Wai Hong did within 72 hours is created a new platform called Beep, which enabled small businesses to get online and sell their products at a time when there was no longer any foot traffic to stores, business was drying up. He enabled many of his customers that he served normally as POS customers in his first business to be able to sell their products remotely. And thousands of companies got online as a result of his platform that he built to be able to connect directly to consumers in cities. And because there's such a big need for delivery services, Wilson Bay had an insurance tech business that he was able to launch a new product to cover health insurance for these delivery staff, 15,000 delivery staff that are able to be covered through his insurance program that he launched as a result of COVID, and thereby creating new ecosystems to address the problems that emerged as a result of the pandemic. And so these are just some examples of people who made quick changes to their platforms, to their businesses to address the specific problems that were emerging as a result of the pandemic. And many more of these entrepreneurs are doing the same. Some of them working with governments, creating entire national systems for, say, PPE supplies, for healthcare data sort of platforms. And these are young people. These are people under the age of 40 who are doing this and really moving the needle to create systems that will eventually replace the way that the traditional ways of doing business and bring new ways of doing business thanks to technology. Now we come to our final sort of part of the presentation. I apologize, this has gone on probably a little bit over time, but where does liberal arts education play a role in all of this? We've talked about entrepreneurship, we've talked about technology, and really what is the role of a liberal arts education as it relates to this great reset and how we look at the future ahead? Well, as many of you probably know, a liberal arts education really comes from the ancient times when there was a theory or a belief of what sort of epitomized a comprehensive educational sort of experience. And it was really this liberal arts education that was intended to create, individuals who were educated in a universal fashion, had an understanding of the world so they can contribute in a meaningful and substantive way. The 7 sort of liberal arts consisted of the trivium and the quadrivium, and many of these topics like rhetoric, grammar, logic, astronomy, mathematics, geometry, music were considered the core subjects. Today in our own liberal arts colleges in the United States in particular, these topics are now really around humanities, social science, natural sciences, and formal sciences. And what I noticed is many of the McCabe scholars have very interesting backgrounds. I looked at some of your areas of study, things like biochemistry and anthropology double majors, English literature and biology, computer science and anthropology. I mean, I think what's so interesting about what our McCabe scholars are studying today are things that seem on the surface perhaps very different and not necessarily related, but at the same time, what I think what it reflects is this understanding or this curiosity in the world, but also the understanding that the world should not be sort of viewed in silos, but actually the disciplines of the hard sciences, the humanities do have relationships. Someone studying biochemistry and peace studies, perhaps in the future, what happens in the biochemistry world will have impact on how nations interact because of the inventions and the creations that come about as a result of that technology. And to be very specific, where we stand today, some would argue, is the 4th Industrial Revolution. The movement from agrarian society to the factory was driven by the steam engine, by electricity, by the IT era of the personal computer. But today where we stand is at a moment where there's a convergence of the physical, the biological, the virtual, all coming together to create things that we have no idea what that will bring for the future of mankind. And so this 4th Industrial Revolution, I would argue, really calls on the need for people to think horizontally, to think in a multidisciplinary way, and to think in a way that's based on values, based on beliefs that are going to be rooted in what truly makes us who we are as human beings, and not be swept away by the technology itself. And so there are many issues that are going to come about because of this rise of the digital sort of economy. Data privacy is probably the one on most people's minds today, and how this data is treated, how it's managed, how it's controlled, how is of great consequence. The other issue people often talk about is employment. What's going to happen to the job market when technology starts to take over? AI starts to replace people in the jobs that we think are so critical in what we do today. So these are also going to be big questions. But on top of all that is the ethical dilemmas that we're going to face in terms of the role that technology plays, how it interacts with human beings, particularly in the case of biotechnology, when we have the ability to create new organisms for the first time, man-made DNA, and what that means as a consequence to our own society. These are issues that have never been answered in our time, but need to be answered, and that require an ability to think about these issues in a profound way. And finally, the inequity. We talk about the digital economy as a tool to address poverty, to eliminate poverty, but then for those who do not get on the sort of digital bandwagon, what happens to them? How do we manage these potential inequities that arise as a result of the technology? And so I want to just conclude here with a quote that is very dear to me. As I said, I was a literature major at Swarthmore. My thesis was actually on the Confucian intertextualities of Thoreau's Walden. So it was a study of transcendentalism, American philosophy, but the influences that, say, Chinese philosophy had on Thoreau during his time. And I thought, wow, what a very abstract concept. Who's ever going to care about this topic except for myself, because I was curious. As I move forward in life, the lessons and things that I studied at Swarthmore are more and more relevant to my life today. This deliberate effort by Thoreau to go to the woods, to live deliberately, and really suck the marrow of life is I think, number one, very important to us as Swarthmore students who spend time in Crum Woods to think about life. It's a great place to start. It's a great place to sort of anchor yourself. But as you move forward, hopefully you take that spirit of curiosity and living life deliberately to pursue the things that are meaningful to you, but also take the education that you've gained from Swarthmore and apply it to the big issues of the world. How are you going to contribute to the Great Reset? It's the youth of today that are going to define the future of tomorrow. And you have to take a responsibility as you embark on that journey to really do something that you feel is meaningful and important. And so when I look at the world today, when I look at things like US-China relations, I realize that despite the rhetoric and the fighting that's happening, that these two worlds are not that far apart. The transcendentalist movement that I studied as a college student has this amazing blend of East and West from its roots. And this is one of the great American philosophies, where they have a great respect of nature and a great respect of what man's potential is. But I think that this area of study, or transcendentalist movement, also reminded me of how close we are as communities, as people, no matter if you live in America or in China or in Ethiopia or in Latin America. It doesn't matter. What matters is that we have this common humanity, and that is something that I hope that all of you as McCabe scholars will pursue and do something to contribute to bridging that and creating a better world and ultimately the Great Reset. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brian, for that very interesting talk. We were very grateful to hear your remarks. We've had some excellent questions in the chat. The first one is from Seth Rubenstein, who's class of 2014. And he says, what do you think about the seemingly growing divide between Chinese and American internet?
Yes, I think it's something that I wish wasn't the case. I think that the internet is intended to bring people together, not create divides. I think it's a challenge that will only become more challenging as we move forward. But I think that this is something ultimately that I hope can be addressed, because I think that the world is served is deprived of an important opportunity if these two worlds are not able to communicate. And particularly, what I always believe is that in the world we have much bigger issues to address as a community. That being climate change, that being disease, again, poverty alleviation. It's only if these two nations work together can we really solve these problems. And if you have internets that are separate and not able to communicate, then we are doing ourselves a disservice.
Thank you. There's another one from Richard Delgado, class of 1997, and he says, "Great chat, Brian. Kudos on your success."
That's a familiar name.
Is-
I remember Richard's name.
Well,
Yeah,
he says,
Richard.
"Thanks, man. Been a while since Sharples." That's the one he said. Right. So his question is, it seems the US is starting to lose some of its entrepreneurial advantage to China and other emerging countries. Certainly when considering the future forward technological growth, international policy, emerging economy, investment by China over the last 20 years. In your opinion, are we seeing the end of US technological dominance globally?
Very good question. Look, I don't think it's necessarily the end of America's technological dominance globally. I think what we've done is become complacent. I think America has one of the greatest abilities to regenerate itself. It has one of the greatest populations of innovators. The flux of immigration is what keeps us fresh and innovative, but the work ethic and spirit of America from its start is also what anchors the country. I think where we've gone wrong in America is really, I think people and innovators may have lost the perspective as to why they're innovating. Growing up in Palo Alto, I've seen how the community has gone from garage innovation culture where people were innovating to solve problems to now they're innovating to go IPO. And that is a dangerous trap to fall into, because then you're doing things for the wrong reasons, in the same way Wall Street in 2008 fell into the trap it did. Everything is becoming short term. And I think that what you have in developing countries, and I would argue China had that, for the last 2 decades, but it itself too is also falling into this short-term sort of mindset trap where people are not necessarily always innovating for the right reasons. But I do see that when I travel to places like Asia or Africa, there are entrepreneurs who are truly and still rightfully so in parts of China and US, but the innovators that I think are really making the impact are those who are focusing on the problems that they need to solve. And so I think that what America needs to do is really understand that while it's been prosperous for the many decades, this prosperity is driven off of the hard work and the innovation that people put the time and resources into. And that's going to have to be both a private sector driven initiative, but also public sector where the government itself invests in the innovation required and supports innovation in a way that nurtures the talent and rewards the talent to do the right kind of work.
Wonderful. And Brian, I think we have time probably just for one more, because we're nearing the end of the presentation. This is from a current student, Annie Zhang, class of 2024, and she asks, how did your education at Swarthmore prepare you for a career abroad and in China, and also as lay the foundation for your successes and as an entrepreneur?
Yes, I've always wondered about that, because I didn't know what I was going to do with an English literature degree if I did not become a doctor. And as I said, as I go through life, I realized more and more how useful the liberal arts education was, mainly because what it provided was a foundation for understanding the world in many different facets, but it also gave me the ability to learn. I think the critical thinking, asking the hard questions as a student when your professors challenge you, but also your fellow students, the debates that you have, and the perspectives that they bring to you as a student, but what you carry with yourself afterwards, are some of the most valuable things that you can take with you in life afterwards. And so, as I've gone through my career, I've gone through so many different twists and turns, and a lot of people would say, geez, what are you doing with your life? And I think many points in my life, I asked the same question. But I think what Swarthmore provided me was the ability to have a northern light to set that direction, that purpose. for myself. So I always knew if I didn't go to medical school, if I didn't work in government, if I worked in, say, internet, I still wanted to achieve the same thing, which was to bring the greatest good to the greatest number of people. It was really a question of how you do that. And then around that were all the sort of considerations of moral and ethics and like, why am I doing this? If what I'm doing, is it right? Is it correct? Am I being a good human being? Am I doing this in the right way? And I think those questions are increasingly important because the ends don't always justify the means. That's my conclusion. And you also have to think about the way you're doing this and what the implications are for not only yourself, but the larger society. And I think Swarthmore gave me that gift in a way that no other experience could. So that's what I would say I took away from Swarthmore. And by the way, I'm happy to answer any more questions. I know we're over time, Marty, but if there's a few others, or if you have a strict cutoff, that's okay too.
I think we have time for a few more, Brian, if you're happy to entertain some more.
Okay.
This is from Andrew Carreras, who is class of 2015. And he says, you mentioned at the outset, smallness allowed Ma's team to innovate, but over time, so much was achieved through scale. Should young, great resetters come to work at Alibaba or in their own garage?
Yes. Okay. Look, I think that really depends on you as a person. What is your appetite for risk? What is your appetite for the road it takes to be a successful entrepreneur? I think going to a company like an Alibaba or Google is a great place to learn. But at some point, if you want to be a great resetter, you need to ask yourself, what is it that you're going to bring to the world? And whether or not working in that organization or going out and doing your own thing is the right approach. And I can speak to you as someone who's done both. And I'm actually, I left Alibaba not once, but twice. So I've experienced what it's like to be at a big company and what it means to start a startup. And I would say that I went back to Alibaba, the reasons I did, because I believed that what the company was doing was very aligned with what I believed as an individual. And it was an amazing experience. And I wouldn't have had that platform or that scale of impact if it wasn't for being able to work at Alibaba at that time. But what I believe today and what I believe when I left those times is that there were certain things I felt I needed to do and to really address what I think was important at the time. And right now, what I think is very important is this US-China relations. And I'm spending some time on that because I feel that if I don't do that now, then the consequences of what kind of world will result will have an impact not only on me, but my children. So everything has its moment, and you have to ask yourself what is right for you. But there's always pros and cons to both approaches.
Okay, Brian, I think it's time for the last question. It's from Caroline Purcell, who's class of 1962, and she says, you've discussed mostly economic uses of these technologies. What about their social and political uses?
Yes, so social, I would say there's one thing I did want to share, and thank you for asking that. We have recognized, or Alibaba has recognized the need for focus on sustainability. And one of the impacts of the digital economy, potentially e-commerce, is the wastage of things like packaging material, carbon footprint because of deliveries and whatnot, and also obviously data centers. So one of the things that we've tried to do is use the technology to also change social behavior, particularly in terms of awareness of environment. And so we've gamified, if you think about the 700 million users on Alipay that use it to pay for things daily, we've also used that opportunity to gamify behavior that promotes responsible sort of carbon usage and environmental sort of awareness in terms of how you use transportation, how you use other behaviors that will actually reduce your carbon footprint. And by gamifying that, what you do is you build carbon credits as an individual, and then you can use those credits to actually contribute to planting trees, say in the Gobi Desert. We've planted 100 million trees as a result of this gamification. We have over 550 million people using this platform. And that is one area that you can impact social behavior. The other one is in giving and philanthropy. We believe that philanthropy is not just the amount you give, but the level of participation. And here, again, utilizing a platform like Alipay to enable people to contribute more easily to charitable causes is another thing that has been pushed through such a platform. In terms of policy or government, there is an e-government movement that's also happening to simplify processes and allow people to access government more easily with the daily needs that they have, but also other things that require government communication. And that has been done in over 260 of the largest cities in China. That makes it so much easier now for the public to engage government. And so that's another area where the technology is being applied.
Well, thank you, Brian. That was very interesting, and it was a very inspiring McCabe lecture. So I'd like to thank you on behalf of the entire Swarthmore community here in Swarthmore, and I understand from our data tuning in from around the globe. So thank you again, Brian, for your time, and we hope to see and hear more from you soon.
Thank you, Marty, and I apologize for the technical glitch. Thanks for people's patience. Very appreciative of you and Swarthmore College for this opportunity, and thank you for joining.
It's been our pleasure. Thank you, Brian.
Okay, bye-bye.